want to talk to you about dive lights because I've had several comments about Alec, how can I save my dive light? Alec, every time I use a dive light, it ruins. I go through dive lights worse than air. They always get ruined on me. Cheap, expensive, it doesn't matter. I hear this complaint all the time, and it's a legitimate complaint. I won't begin to tell you how many dive lights I've ruined in my life. And I mean, my dive light experience goes back to a candle in a pickle jar. You know, it wasn't yesterday. Now they're very sophisticated. The dive lights are almost invariably made of aluminum. You know, and coated. Usually it's anodized aluminum, so they don't even scratch anymore. And they use very good O-rings, good fits. There's no switches on many of them anymore, and that was a big problem. Batteries, switches, wires, there's none of that anymore. They're great. But there's one thing that will almost guaranteed that it'll make your dive light last a long time. One thing. And it's you. You have to do just one thing. If you do it, your dive light will last a long time. I guarantee it. Okay, sort of. If you don't do it, I do guarantee if you don't do this, you'll ruin your dive light in no time at all. So what is that secret? Let me show you. Let me take a minute. This is a relatively simple, in fact, a very simple and relatively inexpensive dive light. 25, 30 bucks, you get one, and they're great. They're LED, really, really bright. I won't shine it in your eyes because they're really bright. We wouldn't have these when I started diving. A big dive light. We used to take a 6-volt battery and hook it on our belt with a wire running up to a tractor sealed beam. Are you listening to this? And after we got it turned on at the dive site, then we took some grease and we smeared grease all over the contact so it would last the dive. And we would go on the dive and it would last the whole dive. At the end of the dive, we would cut the wire on the battery, put a new square battery on it, and all. You know, so this is amazing. And the light wasn't as good as this. Here's what you have to do. First of all, this particular light is good because it has no switches. You unscrew it a little wee bit, it goes off. You screw it in a little bit, spring loaded, it goes on. Unscrew it, it goes. No switches, no wires. There are 2 batteries in there. Now, here's the problem. Those batteries, and they're just a couple of AA batteries, you know, bunny batteries, you know, the ones, the Duracells. But people don't realize that those Duracell batteries, Dry-Cell, alkaline, whatever you want to call them, they work the same way as your car battery. They use different chemicals and they're more sophisticated, but the basic principle is the same. You have a chemical reaction which produces electricity. It also produces hydrogen. Now in your car battery, that hydrogen is gassed off and it disappears and so on. But you know, on your car battery it says don't smoke or have any sparks around the car battery because the hydrogen could explode. You don't see those warnings on these batteries because they have different systems, different way of getting rid of that hydrogen gas, but it still is there. These little Duracells do emit a gas. Now, if they're left in there for any length of time, not only will that gas affect the aluminum and destroy it, but the batteries will break, the shell will break, they'll swell up and they get jammed in there. You open the battery, you open the light, you look inside, oh, you throw it away. Just throw it away. You can't save it. So it's up to you to be sure that doesn't happen. So you're on your dive, okay? Oh, good dive. Whoa, look at that, Kevin. Whoa, that's great. You come up after you dive, you turn off the light. You get back on board the dive boat, you take all your stuff off, you hang it up, you take care of everything, because I know you do that. You rinse your regulator well, I've talked about that. Your dust cap and all that neat stuff. Rinse your BC, your suit, the day you dive's over for the day. And what do? You take your dive light and throw it in your dive bag. That's why it doesn't last very long. You've got to give the dive light the same care you give your regulator. It's simple though. Here's what you do. You undo the dive light, open it up. Just that simple. And then when you get it open, you set the head over there, good. You dump out the 2 batteries, you set them there, good. And now you're left with an empty shell, okay? And it's inside this empty shell that there may be moisture, condensation from the if you're on a cold water dive. Even if you're diving in the ocean, it's cooler under the water, there'd be condensation. Warm and moist on the dive boat, when you go underwater, condensation, water. And there's a hydrogen gas in there. The hydrogen gas dissolves in the water. That's right. Now you have an acid. And aluminum doesn't like acid. So you have to take care of this. Now here's what you do. You do not rinse the head. Blow it out like that. Make sure it's dry. Set it there. However, this you can rinse. Fresh water. Scoop it. Shake it all up. Dump it out. Now it has to be dried. Open. It has to dry open. Yes, you want the outside to dry. But that's not critical. The inside is critical. You got to rinse it and make sure that the inside dries. So you set it down maybe in the sun, someplace where it's safe, where the wind will get it, and let it dry thoroughly. Then you should also check the O-rings. and make sure that the O-rings are good. There's a couple of things you can do. You can take the O-rings and squeeze them off. I don't know if you can get in close. I'm going to show these folks, Kevin, how to take O-rings off. I'm going to use this battery kit. I think we talked about that before. I love this battery kit because in this battery kit, can you see that, Kevin? There's actually an O-ring remover. So if it's a small O-ring, you can use this hard plastic. It's flexible, but it's still hard. O-ring remover to get underneath an O-ring. You see, like that, and pop this underneath the O-ring, and that O-ring just pops right off. Now, why don't you use a needle or a paper clip or a screwdriver? That's easier. An X-Acto knife or whatever you have, because you ruin the O-ring. This O-ring remover is soft, flexible plastic. It pops right out. Now, if you don't have one of those, watch this. Can you still see here, Kevin? Most O-rings, if they're about an inch or bigger, if you take your fingers and you just go like this, watch closely there. You see that? Can you see it popping up there? That's just some squeezing. I'll just grab that and pull it off. Point is, don't scratch, don't crack the O-ring. You not only can tear and nick the O-ring, taking it off with something sharp, but you scratch the O-ring groove and it won't seal as well. Okay, so the head, the O-rings, and the body. Rinsed and dry. What about the batteries? Well, if they're still good, and they should be, let them dry for a little while, put them in a Ziploc bag, and you're all set to go. Now, after this is dried well, put the O-rings back on carefully, put the 2 O-rings back on, put the head back on loosely, like so. It's nice and dry, it doesn't matter. And then you take your dive light and you put it with your 2 batteries with the Ziploc bag. That's all there is to it. I mean, it's not complicated. The point is that you must open the dive light, remove the batteries, rinse and dry the battery carrier, the body, okay, and then put the batteries into a Ziploc bag, and you're all set to go for the next dive. And that dive light will last forever. Not the batteries, you have to replace them once in a while, but you won't have any problems with corrosion or acid. Now, if you go to a more sophisticated light, it's not much bigger. Dive lights are crazy today. Not much bigger, but this light is incredibly strong. It has different beams on it as well. You can get different powers. It has a power indicator on it. This is rechargeable, you see. But the same principle applies, even with rechargeable batteries. So at the end of the dive, same thing. The end of the dive, same thing. You take the head off, okay? Make sure the head is dry and clean, like that. Don't rinse it. Take the battery out, rechargeable. You did take this one out anyway because you're going to recharge it for the next dive, right? And here's the body. Nothing in there but a spring. Give it a rinse in fresh water. Take the O-rings off. If you look at them as any sand or salt, take the O-rings off carefully and clean them. Maybe a little bit of lubricant. Go easy on the lubricant. Let the whole thing dry nicely. This battery, make sure it's dry. Put it into the charger and you're all set to go. When you're finished, it's all nice and dry. Put the body back into the head. Put the battery into a Ziploc bag, right? Acid. And that light, these lights are not cheap. These lights are $100 or more. So that light will last you forever. Just as simple. Now, your photographers out there, the same principle applies. If you have batteries in your camera, you're taking it underwater, there's going to be condensation and there's going to be hydrogen gas and acid. Your strobe, what's a strobe? A strobe is just a dive light. It's just a dive light. It's either a dive light that stays on if it's one of the new type of strobes or lights to stay on, so you can use it as a strobe and as and for video, or even as a strobe, you know, a flash. Strobe is just a fancy word for flash. It means it's an underwater flash, which means we can double the price on it. That's the only difference. So flash, and they have batteries in them. Same thing. Open it up. O-rings, check for sand and take them out carefully. Dry the whole thing. Now, but be careful with this because the head, the electronics, and the switch is part of the body. So you be careful rinsing that. Rinse it out with a Kleenex perhaps. Don't be pouring water in there. Let the whole thing dry very, very carefully and store the battery separately. Do not put lights or strobes or cameras away for a long period of time, and I'm talking a couple of weeks. Anything longer than a week or two, get the batteries out of that darn thing, or they simply won't last. I'm going to finish up with just this little kit, because this is a great little kit. This kit's from Intova, but there's lots of these. You can go almost any place and get these little camera kits. But these camera kits are good for dive lights too. I've already shown you the O-ring remover, okay? There's a little squeezy thing with a brush on it for brushing dust. But there's lens cleaner. There's a lens wipe. There's a little Q-tips, special little Q-tips for cleaning inside the grooves and everything else. There's silicone grease. for the O-rings and the grease. And down here, this is really more for photographers, but these are little packets of desiccant. So if you have a camera, a good camera in a housing, you put one of these in the camera first. The moisture, the condensation, which is going to occur, as we just talked about, is soaked up by this, so it doesn't condense on the lens or the inner workings of the camera. These little kits are like about 10 bucks. To buy all that stuff, it costs you 25 or 30. So one of those little, and it comes in a nice little plastic case. So there's a good idea. Okay, one more time, just to recap. Dive light, right? Head, body, battery. Keep them separate. After the dive, take them apart. Check the O-rings. Clean, rinse if you can, rinse, clean, dry, put them back together. Put the battery into a Ziploc bag separately, and you won't have any more trouble with your dive light. Just that simple. So I can't remember your names, I'm sorry, but whoever it was asking about dive lights, there you go. It's just that simple. It's up to you. So don't walk into your dive store. Happened all the time when I had my dive store. Don't walk into your dive store and say, I bought this dive light 6 months ago and I've used it 3 times and it's ruined. Look at the inside, it's ruined. That's your fault. Anyway, there's maybe some information in there that might be helpful to you. Hope it is. Hope it answered your questions. Thanks very much. Talk to you again soon. Alec Peirce. Alec Peirce Scuba Tech Tips. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.